So the first video timed out while I was getting the baby, so this is part 2. Again, this is 3.1 for the IB class and 8.1 if you're in the secondary math 3 honors class. So this is to use the graphing calculator. The first thing you're going to need to do is switch it to the correct mode. So we're going to hit mode, go down to the line where it says function, parametric, polar, sequence, go over to sequence and hit enter. That's going to allow us to work with sequences instead of just like an XY coordinate plane, that kind of thing. So then we're going to go to y equals, and it's going to pull up this kind of menu, and this is going to explain what the different values or what the different options are. So when I hit y equals, that's what it pulls up. This right here, this n minimum, that's telling you n is the term that we're looking at, not the value, but the term that we're looking at. So are we looking at the first term, the second term, the third term? So typically that's going to be 1 because you're looking at your first term. Then it's going to want the actual equation, so it's always going to be recursive. So if we look back to our example from before, we were looking at, this is the one that I did before. That's your explicit. That would be my recursive, where I want the previous term plus 2. So this uses u instead of a, but all we're going to do is type in u of n minus 1 plus 2. Now to hit the u, you want second 7. So second 7 brings up u. And then to tell it we want the previous term, we say, hey, take the term that was the previous one. Then we're going to add 2 to that. And then the last thing it wants is, what is the initial value? What is your first term? Because we're looking at the first term. So first term in ours was 7, because that's where we started. Now, what this allows us to do is, if we go back to the main menu, this allows us to identify different terms. So if I hit that second 7 again, that's the u, what term do I want? Do I want the second term? That gave me 9. So if I look back, 9. And our third term should give me 11. So second 7, our third term is 11. And then I know I didn't really explain where this came from, but it's the same process. So if I want my 10th term, so second 7, I want my 10th term, that's going to be 25. So that's how our calculator is going to allow us to work with these. So then we have some examples. So if I want to determine if the form is explicit or recursive and then find the 10th term, this first one is going to be that explicit formula. Because it's not relying on a previous term, it's just saying, hey, take what term you're looking at, multiply it by 2, subtract 3. So then it also wants us to find the 10th term. So take the term that you want, subtract 3. So 2 times 10 minus 3, 17. You could also find the first term if you wanted. So the first term would be 2 times 1 minus 3. So 2 minus 3, negative 1. Something like that. Okay, hold on again. Do we sit down and play? Okay, so my mom has Mary now, so you might hear them in the background. So this next one, you see an n-1, but this is actually not recursive. It's still explicit because it's a exponent, not a subscript. It's not referencing, hey, take your previous term. So this is still explicit. So to find our nth or our 10th term, you do 2 times 3 raised to the 10 minus 1, which ends up being 39,366. So if we do the calculator, 2, 3 to the 10 minus 1, or just to the 9th, that's your value. So make sure you have that one written down, and then to kind of counter that, this is actually a recursive equation. Because it's referencing a previous term. So we're going to have to, we could find the 10th term by hand. We could say, okay, well, my first term is 5. My second term says 2 times my previous term plus 3. And we're going to continue that. So my previous term was 5. And so then that gives us my new term, which is 8 times 2 is 16. And then take that term, so 2 previous term. So then we're going to do 2 times 19 and so on, and all the way up to a to the a10, my 10th term. Yeah, I don't want to do that, and I don't think you do either. So we could do it by hand, but we're going to do it with our calculator. So we need to determine what these values are going to be. We're going to start on the first. What color did I use for this? We're going to start with our first term. So that n minimum is going to be the first term. And then this is saying what's the value of the first term? Well, our value was 5. And then what's the recursive equation? So on the calculator, I need to say 2 times my previous term plus 3, and 2 is going to multiply this whole thing. So I'm going to type in 2 times u, oops, parentheses, and then u, parenthesis again, n minus 1, and then add 3 to that, and then the 2 is multiplying the whole thing. And then our starting value, or our first term, is 5. So then if I just do a check and say, well, what's the second one? Oops. Parenthesis 2, 16. What's the third one? Would have been 38, and so on. So I can do this with the 10th one. $5,626. So that's why the calculator is going to be really helpful in determining something like that. And then that's all the notes for that one.